Hey everybody, Rob here at etrailer.com. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Curt trailer wiring harness on our 2018 Ford EcoSport. Now our Curt wiring harness is going to provide us with a 4-pole flat trailer connector, which is going to be one of the most common trailer connectors, so we can have all the required lights to get down the road safely and legally. It's going to give us our tail lights, turn signals, and our stoplights. Now our trailer wiring is designed to stay on the inside until we're ready to use it. But whenever we do want to use it, we just simply open up the rear door and we'll drop it out the back. Now the weather stripping here provides us enough cushion for our wire where it won't get damaged by the door and we don't have to worry about it. But whenever we're not using it, there's plenty of room to store it inside the spare tire compartment here so it's out of the way. Now, as far as the installation goes, our wiring is going to install behind our tail lights, so we are going to have to get access to behind these panels so we can wire everything in. Now it's also going to have a powered converter box that's going to take the signal from our EcoSport and turn it into a working signal for our trailer. It's also going to protect our EcoSport's wiring in case there is any kind of problems on the trailer end, and it'll prevent any kind of backfeeding. But one thing about that powered taillight converter is that we are going to have to send power up to the battery because it's going to prevent putting too much strain and stress on our factory lights and pulling too much power from them. Now I know a lot of customers may be a little bit nervous about running the wires and even cutting and splicing into their factory wires to connect in the harness. But rest assured, this is definitely something you can do at home. There's no special tools needed, and we'll walk you through how to test for each function and which wire we're going to be using. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and do that together now. To start our installation out, you want to open up the rear hatch, and we want to make sure that we remove the floor coverings. So we'll pull out on this panel. We can set it aside. We also want to remove any kind of floor coverings, even this small panel here. Along the back here, we're going to have this threshold panel. There's going to be 3 push pin fasteners holding it in place. We want to pull those out so we can pull that threshold panel out. So you can grab yourself a flat blade screwdriver or a trim panel tool. You just want to come underneath those push pins. You're going to have one right here in the center. Kind of pull it out. And then we're going to work our way towards the edges, pulling the other 2 out. And once you have all those 3 removed, you want to grab the panel, come underneath, start lifting upward, and then I'll release the clips. Be mindful though, there is a little sensor over on the passenger side, so you don't want to pull it too hard. There's going to be a little tab right on the bottom. We should be able to push in on that, and disconnect the sensor, and then up here should be able to just slide that tab to the side. If it doesn't want to let go, you can take a trim panel tool or flat blade screwdriver again and pull that clip off right on the plastic so we don't have to worry about it. So at this point we're going to move to this side, and on each side we want to grab that felt liner here and kind of pull it back so we can get access to this area behind the taillight on each side. So you can kind of just start at the bottom and kind of just peel it away from the weather stripping here. Now you may find you don't have quite as much room as you'd like, because really this isn't going to be enough room. So we do need to move up to the plastic panel here. And again, we just want to pull the weather stripping away a little bit just so we can get access to behind the panel. You can either use a plastic trim panel tool or your hand. You just want to start working it away from the car towards the center. And then if you come right underneath the lower section, we're going to have a push pin fastener that's actually holding the felt liner in here. So we'll grab our trim panel tool, we'll pull that out and see how much room that gives us, see if we can get back there. We can always come to this section here as well. It's a little trap door. It'll help give us access to the wires inside, because pretty far inside here, we're going to have a white connector that's going to be going directly into the back of our taillight. We're going to reach around to the outside of the connector, squeeze the tab, and pull away. That'll unlock it. It'll give us access to all of our wires. Now here's a little tab that's going to be going on that connector. You need to press down on that center section. I will let you know it is very stiff. It's kind of hard to get in there when you're back there because this tab is actually going to be on the back side going into the plug like this. But now that we have this wire removed and the panel's loosened up so we have some room, we're going to move over to the passenger side and do the same thing. You're going to want to pull the tape back off the wires on each one of the connectors on each side. That way we can see the colors and expose the wires for each individual pin on the connector. Now we want to get a circuit tester and we need to test each one of these pins and figure out what the function is. So right now I have my headlights on, no other functions are running, and I'm going to take my probe and I'm going to check each one of these pins. So it looks like we're only getting power from this pin right here, and if we're looking at it, it'll be the second from the left if we have the clip on top. So if we look, that's going to be a purple wire with a green stripe. That's going to be our taillight signal on the driver's side. So we need to write that down or remember that. We're going to move over to the passenger side and verify and test the wires over there and see which pin location and color wire it is. So now we want to turn our taillights off completely, and we want to turn our left turn signal on so it's the only one running so we can isolate that circuit. And we're going to go through, taking our tester and checking each one of the pins again. So on the driver's side, our left turn signal looks like it's going to be the gray wire with the orange stripe. So again, we want to write that down. We'll turn our left turn signal off, turn the right turn signal on, and verify the location and color wire over there. Now on the passenger side, our turn signal wire is actually going to be the green wire with the orange stripe on it. So we want to remember that for the passenger side. So now that we have our turn signals figured out, we want to make sure that we check our brake signal as well, because we need to know if our brake signal runs along the same wire or not. So if you have an extra set of hands, you can have them press on the brake pedal with no other signals working. But if you don't, a trick I like to use is if you can take a pry bar or something long, you can use it to push on the brake pedal and then wedge it in between the driver's front seat. So on the driver's side, the yellow colored pale wire with the green stripe on it is going to be our brake signal. So now we want to grab one of the quick splices out of our kit. If you look at it, we'll have one open end on one side and two open ends on the other side. We want to take our wire, and I'm going to start with my brake wire. Kind of want to open it up a little bit just so we can get the wire inside. We want to get one of the factory wires going all the way through that channel. And we can grab our wiring kit. Since we're on the brake signal wire, we want to bring in our red wire. We'll come in from one side of the open end, kind of feed it into that connector. Grab a pair of pliers. There's a little tab on top. We want to squeeze that tab to where it comes down, pierces both the wires inside the connector. Now you know it's secure because you won't be able to pull that wire out, and you shouldn't be able to move it on there. We can simply just close the cover over the top of it, keep it from opening back up. Now that's exactly how all of these wires are going to hook up to the factory wires. And what's really nice about our wiring kit, it is going to have a legend right on here to let you know which color wire hooks up to what function. That's why we wanted to test each one of the wires at the connector so we could hook them up to the proper signals. So we're going to continue hooking these up. Just keep in mind, you are going to need to route the green wire along the threshold panel over to the passenger side and hook it up the same way. So here we made all of our connections. We actually just put all of our wiring back into that little pocket, had it run down this panel here, Eventually we can secure everything, but then we ran our green wire along the threshold here and made our connection over on the passenger side the same way. Now we're going to have two more wires that we're going to need to work with. We're going to have a white wire with the ring terminal. That's going to be our ground wire. We're going to find a flat spot of metal that we can attach it to, or an existing factory ground. Now we're also going to have a black wire. It's a pre-stripped end on it. This is going to be our power source, and we need to run this up to the battery. Now obviously this wire is not going to reach the battery, but they do provide us with the length of wire in your kit. But we'll start by grounding our system first. I'm actually just going to pull this panel back a little bit, and we have some really nice thick double up metal here to where we got a couple different layers of metal, so it'll be a really good secure spot to ground this. I'm going to take the included self-tapping screw and a 1/4-inch bit driver. I'm going to go right to where there's a couple layers of metal there, so I know I have a good connection. Whenever you put your ground in, you do want to double check that it's secure and that ring terminal isn't moving around, but you also don't want to strip out the screw. For our black wire, we'll just grab one of the butt connectors from our kit, slide it over, and crimp it in place. Then we can take the length of black wire that they give us in our kit. I'm going to strip back a piece of the end of it, and we'll crimp it on to the other end of our butt connector. Now fortunately for us, there's actually a really easy spot that we can route our wire outside the vehicle so we can run it underneath. If we pull back this panel here and we look right in the corner, there's actually a grommet right there. It already has a factory wiring going through it, so we should just find the end of our wire and be able to poke a hole, start feeding it down through the bottom so we can reach it underneath our EcoSport. So you want to make sure you mount your converter box. I do realize that there's not a whole lot of room over here though, because the panels sit directly against the body. But we have this nice cutout right here, which I just used a zip tie at the top of the converter box. There's a little tab. Just kind of recess the box into that hole and then zip tied it so it'd be nice and secure and not rattle around. But now that we have all of our connections made inside, we can start putting all of the panels back and make sure that we tape up any kind of loose wires or secure them in some sort of way so that they're not causing any kind of damage, interfering with anything, or making any noise. Now you want to make sure you plug your sensor back in. You can always slide it back onto that clip that's holding it in place. And then whenever you do put your threshold back in, you want to make sure that the wire stays away from the openings here, because that's where those clips are actually going to go into. So we don't want the wire to get damaged. So if you can, try to tuck it underneath the weather stripping here, just a little bit, even if it's just the corner piece, just to get it to hold it still so we can get the threshold panel back in place and not have to worry about crushing the wire and getting damaged underneath those clips. The wires will be protected if it's underneath the panel, but again, we just want to make sure it doesn't interfere with the clips on there. Just kind of tuck it behind, and we get our panel back in place. So here's where our wire came out at the bottom on the driver's side. It's really close to the back bumper, but we should have these factory wires out of this grommet. That's where it came out. Now we need to run this up to the engine compartment so we can hook it to the battery. Now, everybody's going to route theirs a little bit differently, but you want to make sure you stay away from any moving components like the suspension or any major heat sources like the exhaust, because we don't want our wire to melt or get damaged. You also want to use as many zip ties as you feel necessary to make sure it is secure and it's not going to fall down when we're driving down the road. So I'm going to run my wire all the way up to the battery, and I'll show you how I got it there. So I started running my wire. I went over all of my Evac canisters, and once I came down, I actually started following it along the outside edge of the fuel tank. And I actually started coming back towards the center, and right here, there's an open spot in the frame. We just took a piece of Airline tube I actually ran it the length of the frame. That way I could get my wire to come out and stay contained inside of there and protected. Now we also use that same method to take an airline tube and from the top of the engine compartment feed it down so we can meet up with our wire, attach it to it, and then pull it up top. This is going to be a really easy way to get the wire up top, and you can still kind of see where the path it's going to take, where you can prevent being close to anything that's going to be moving or any extreme heat sources. Now you just want to carefully start pulling all that slack up from underneath. And it's not a bad idea to go underneath and double check, make sure you did get all the slack. And you don't have a wad of wire underneath because we don't want it to catch on anything when we're driving down the road. And once you do have it all the way up and you have all the slack pulled out of it, what I like to do is I'll kind of just route my wire over towards the battery here. And then we have a positive cable here. So I'm just going to take a zip tie and I'm going to anchor my cable to the factory one. That way I don't have to worry about it sliding back down, causing any problems in the future. All right, we're going to open up the cover that's on our battery. And we need to remove the nut so we can get access to that post. But before we hook up our actual power wire, we want to put a fuse holder in place so we have a fuse protection for our wiring. So it's going to be one loop, so I'm just going to cut that wiring in half and we'll strip back both ends of it. Now on one end, we want to grab another one of the butt connectors out of our kit and we'll crimp it in place. On the other end of our fuse holder, we're going to take one of the large ring terminals and we'll crimp it in place. Then we can estimate about how much wire we're going to need. I always like to give myself a little bit of extra. So let's go ahead and cut my black power wire about there, strip the end of it back, and we can connect it to the other end of our butt connector. Now at this point you want to make sure that the fuse is not inside the fuse holder because we want to hook it up to our battery. You always want to leave your fuse out before you hook it up. So we'll grab a 10mm socket. We're going to pull the nut off the top post here. I always like to run my ring terminal through the same channel as the factory one. That way hopefully we can get our cover back in place without having to cut anything. Just make sure the ring terminal is over the stud, get it started, and we'll tighten that nut back up. Do a quick test. We still can't get that cover back in place. So now would be a good time. We can put our fuse in place, clean up any loose wires, and put any panels back that we may need to. The final step of our installation is going to be testing the functions and making sure all the circuits are working properly. So I went ahead and hooked up my 4-pole tester. And if you need one of these, you can pick them up here at etrailer.com using part number I26. But we can see that my taillight function is working, my left turn signal, my right turn signal, and my brakes. All we have left to do now is hook up to our trailer and hit the road. But again, I'm Rob here at etrailer.com, and that'll finish up your look at the Curt wiring harness on our 2018 Ford EcoSport.